Thanks for listening to the Let's Talk About It podcast, brought to you by WeDeliverYourVision.com, the go-to place for delivering your vision and getting traction fast. Hi everyone, welcome to the Let's Talk About podcast. I'm your host, John Hetherington, and today I'm really pleased to be sitting down with Jim Gibson. Great to have you here, Jim.
Pleasure to be here, John. Thanks for having me.
Yes, really looking forward to the conversation. But before we get into it, Jim, it'd be really helpful just to help the audience get acquainted with what you do, your background, and maybe a couple of interesting facts. So if you'd like to introduce you to yourself, to the audience, that'd be great.
Thanks, John. So currently, I have a couple hats, 2 or 3 hats actually. But my main role right now here in Calgary is the Dean and Chief Catalyst for the brand new School for Advanced Digital Technology. Right. It started, 14 months ago, kicked off a brand new school, really to address the talent pipeline that's emerging here in Calgary. I come from the venture and the entrepreneurial background. So my background is startups. I've had 6 or 7 startups. Switched over to the dark side and moved into the capital side on a couple of occasions. And then, have been deeply involved in the ecosystem as well here of Calgary, understanding what community does in terms of supporting and building entrepreneurial talent. And so really have an educational focus right now. I have a community background, was deeply involved in the foundation of something called the Rainforest Movement here in Calgary. And then finally, I'm one of the founders of Thin Air Labs, which is a venture studio and investor in early stage startups here in Calgary, in Alberta. So bunch of hats.
Yes, awesome. So you're really investing into Calgary and building out that technology skill to build business in Calgary and diversify our economy is what I'm hearing.
We're long on Calgary. We think it's a perfect time to get into a market that, that really has struggled a bit as it thinks about diversification. But we got to get moving. And so we're leaning in as best as we can on all fronts.
Yes, we can almost consider Calgary as a technology startup in the bigger scheme of things.
Well said. I think that's a great way to look at it. There's a bit of fit and start and a little bit of agility that's needed. So we need to consume the agile method here in the city. So, yeah.
Yep. No kidding. So it's really interesting to hear you've gone through the 6, 7 startups yourself. And I tend to work with both small and large companies, but I really find the startups most interesting and most fun because it's so energetic. There's so much to do at the beginning of any business, and the leaders want to go and deliver. But what I find is both of us have a technology background, is that there's often challenges with adopting new technology at the right time or in the right way. So I wanted just to use this time with us today, just to dive into a bit more around the biggest technology mistakes that startups have. And I'll kick it off with one of the ones I see often is the shiny object syndrome, where there's a lot of really good marketing around software. The vendors do a really good job at marketing, and it's very appealing to see these savings, cost, time, people savings that these vendors are promising and the software is promising. And I often see companies rushing quite quickly into buying new technology. And sometimes they don't always think that through. So yeah, I just wanted to get your views on that and what you've seen in terms of how people have rushed into technology, but then also how should they work around that?
It is a common challenge with startups, right? They're often technical founder first, right? They rarely have a product person or somebody who's a domain expert that falls in love with the problem. They usually have a technical aspect to it, and so they often lead with that pointy end of the stick. And I think I'll reflect back, but I'll also reflect on where we are right now. I think in the shift away from that. So in the past, architecturally, you could make some very big mistakes if you choose wrong or get too invested in an architecture before you actually release, the concept of a minimum viable product is is you remembering that an MVP concept is not about testing out the architecture. It's about testing the user experience and testing about the product market fit. It is less about testing the scalability of the architecture. The best companies that I've been involved with have really understood that dichotomy, which is to say there's two types of testing of the technology. The first is to really use whatever's available to create that agile approach for product market fit and user experience design. So if you do that, then your architectural taproots aren't as deep as as they need to be ultimately. But then the second phase is really about scalability. And that's where architecture and technology really becomes important. And again, the most successful companies I've seen don't get too fussed about the choices of the tech. And then as they start to hit product market fit and start to get some recurring or existing revenue, then they go looking for that CTO, chief technical officer, chief product officer, who really understands scalability. So that would be mine. And just to finish on that, I think what's happening is there's technology, software, and architecture that's emerging right now that I would argue allows you to take that testing and that moving to minimum viable product much further into the cycle. The low code, no code kind of concepts that you're starting to hear allows us to really push the envelope of the product design without having to invest deeply in scalable stacks. And the last thing I'll say is the ability of the cloud-based computing platforms to give you that scalability, whereas in the past you didn't have that. Now I can with a credit card and $40 a month on Amazon, I can flip my scalability factor by 2, 3, 100%. So
yes,
just some opening thoughts.
Yeah, it's a great comment because, I mean, we've both been in technology long enough to have seen that cycle of 10, 15 years. Any new technology was largely office, enterprise-based, not home-based. And it was a big investment. You had to go all in. You had to really invest in a multi-month, if not multi-year project for any technology upgrade or change. Whereas now it's, to your point around the cloud offerings, the easy small-scale vendor offerings, it's so easy to get into a product and start testing it quickly to the point where there's so much choice, which not only do I see shiny object syndrome, but I also see overwhelm. People don't know where to start. You pick any product, any HR system, procurement, sales process system. There's a wealth of choice out there and a lot of free offers. So I really like your point around starting small with something to get going, because in this going forward, it is much easier to plug and play for sure.
Agreed. Absolutely correct. And I love your comment is that there's folks like us who've seen that journey from the expensive, you can't make a mistake kind of bets that you make, which are to this world of true agile and that ability to do that. And so when you think about your technical co-founder or the people that get involved with that, you want to make sure that they understand that life cycle versus being religious to a certain technical architecture and so forth.
And it's interesting to see how some of the big firms have pivoted, because I remember the saying used to be, you never get fired for hiring IBM and going with those big systems. And although they might not have pivoted as quickly with the software, what IBM have done really, really well is they have a design thinking course, which is, I think the first few modules are free. And they offer a really good online design thinking. And the reason I mention that is because as we're trying to pick a technology, if a startup is thinking, oh, my current processes are too manual, too much transaction, I want to get into a new sales process or inventory management or invoicing or finance system, having that goal in mind, that problem you're solving is absolutely key. And the design thinking process really helps you build that in, because it's pulling in your users, your customers, your stakeholders at different departments in your company, and really starting to help you form what do you need that system to do before you buy it, before you start going to vendors.
And John, I think it's worth pulling that point out a little bit. one of my founding partner with Thin Air, Greg Hart, and his partner Margot Purcell had started a company called Inception U, which created something called the full stack developer.
Mm-hmm.
And their point was very simple, right along your point, is that a third of that 18-week, or I forget how long it is, but that whole course, that whole training on full stack developer, a full third of it was about critical systems and engineering thinking. So about systems thinking, was to say to the software and people who are trying to pivot their career into technology, is you've got to think about thinking. You know, less about, you know, is it JSON or Python or C#, you know, whatever the technology stack is, whatever the user, it's actually to think about thinking. And they've done an amazing job in building this full stack developer program, which really brings that to the fore. And I can tell you, people's heads explodes, especially technical people that go, I thought I was just going to learn how to code. Well, no, in fact, if you're going to lead product and if you're going to lead development, you have to lead thinking about systems. And so I love your point. That I think that's the difference that I'm starting to see here.
Yes, and just to clarify the systems thinking, because it's almost a bit of a misnomer. People hear systems thinking and think it's IT systems or information systems, and it's really not at all. The best analogy I have is around almost like a solar system or a nervous system in your body. It's a system of things connected to your point, to really understand the impact of change throughout the whole ecosystem and everyone affected by it. And there was an interesting story, actually, because when I was working within a financial services company, I was charged with revamping the sales process through using technology, and the project went pretty well. It was a big project to several thousand sales force, but we didn't get the results we expected once we launched. It had increased sales, but nowhere near what we expected. So we ended up asking some of the customers, some of the people getting faster policies, ticking the box for that. But why were they less enthused by the new sales process? And really interesting comment for the feedback from the customers is that they weren't getting a box of chocolates and a bunch of flowers. And this just came out of left field. It's like, what are you talking about? This is an insurance policy. What are you talking about? Flowers and chocolates. Anyway, what we found out is that the sales people were promising when you got your policy, you'd get your policy all good, but then you'd also get a box of chocolates and a bunch of flowers. And our new process didn't have that because we didn't know. So our retrospective around, to your point around systems thinking, is having everyone involved, that whole ecosystem of people involved. So although insurance policy issuance, getting the policy quickly was very important, people really valued those human touches of flowers and chocolates.
Yeah, absolutely. Great story.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And then leading on from that as well, as an entrepreneur and a startup, a tech leader in a business, the other thing around technology, one of the second mistakes I want to measure is that you mentioned about thinking time, that strategic planning. It's that the red dot is not your friend, because in this day and age, it's so easy to get the notifications, the emails, the texts, the chat, whatever. It comes at us fast and hard. And what I always advise is that you take, especially as you're growing your business, because there's a million things, a million people are going to pull you in different directions, is that thinking time, that me time, just to say, where am I taking the business? What are the big rocks I need to attack? What innovation do I need to apply to the business? And that's nothing to do with technology or other people. That's just you thinking through where I need to take my business.
John, it's a very much agree. I didn't mention, I don't know if your audience knows, but I'm actually, I wrote a book and A Tip of the Spear, and it's not about that. It's about to play on your point, is there's a certain state you get to in the creation of something new that is actually quite profound. I have my twin daughters are professional ballet dancers, and I watch them in the studio, and then I watch them on stage, and I learn more from them than they've ever learned from me. Is that there is this notion of a flow state of creativity is magically important in a world of distraction. And so as a CTO or as a chief product officer or as a founder, I completely agree with you, John, that you need that space and time. Creative breakthrough thinking isn't rote. It isn't a process where I get up at 5 a.m. and I you have to get yourself to that state, and that requires distraction removal. It requires whatever works for you. But I really advise and encourage founding teams to understand that creativity and breakthrough thinking requires that space and time. And I did that. I learned that deeply through my career, but also when I wrote my book, and I understood that the writing that I did in that flow state, in that space where there was no distractions and calmness, was game changing versus the writing that I did every morning as a rote thing. I had to rewrite all of that stuff. But I basically wrote the book in 3 sessions of 4 hours. 60,000 words really came out of those states. But it took me 3 or 4 days to get to that state. So anyways, I don't want to go on too long, but I can't encourage that enough. That teams need to find that if they want to break through thinking.
Yes, and it's so easy to feel productive by answering emails, attending meetings, responding to text chats, whatever. But
the busy work of our lives, right?
Exactly, and some of it needs to be dealt with. Absolutely. I mean, the whole delegation and accountability of teams and working through that is a subject of another podcast in the future. But so it's getting in. I love the flow state. Exactly that. As you said, different things for different people. I myself have got into meditation over the last few years. I'm still working on it. It's not an easy thing to do, but even just that calming my brain to stop thinking so fast, to then, and ideas start to come out. And like you say, it's not immediate. It's not like suddenly, aha, you're innovative and it's going to change the world. Because we often forget that events like writing a book, launching a business, get your first round of seed funding, these events, we see them as big deals, but the process leading up to that has been months, if not years, in the making.
Yeah, agreed.
And so it's a real build up to those times. So, and the other point I wanted to bring up as well is actually security as well, because we talked a lot around technology, and a lot of startups build fast, go fast, scale fast. One of the things to really think through is just, it doesn't happen often, but does happen, is those cyber attacks, those phishing attacks. So it's just a quick reminder around technology is amazing, but it also needs to be tamed in terms of making sure it's secure. And the 3 key ways I've seen that done is, it doesn't have to be fancy, but it's mainly around training your staff and your teams just to be aware of phishing emails, just to know and recognize them. And keeping your systems up to date, keep them patched, even if you have to outsource. If technology is not your thing, outsource it. There's so many great firms out there to help patch and keep your systems up to date. And then the third thing is just make sure the data is secure, because the last thing you want to do is start losing any customer data or have that exposed or held to ransom.
The cost is immediate and catastrophic. Especially when it comes to data. And so you can spend a year building your startup in 15 minutes with an improper, with a phishing attack that leads to the leakage of data, you're done. And the world that we're entering, especially with Web3 and some of the work that's been happening on the blockchain, the idea of being able to have immutable trust, the idea that I know for certain that this is true and this is correct and my identity is protected and so forth, is going to become table stakes in startups. Is that this idea of access to data and access to who I am as a person will be, the consumer's going to start demanding a level of certainty and immutability around trust and identity that is going to blow people's minds. I think, so we talk about security, but I think it's going to be a fundamental table stakes of how you release product, and that technology is changing dramatically quickly. So,
Mm.
our advice to startups and small organizations is really pay attention to it. So, John,
Mm.
I agree with all of those, but I also would add that it's getting the consumer, the customer is going to start requiring a level that most companies aren't prepared for.
Mm. Yeah, because as easy it is for startups to switch technology, consumers can also switch startups. They don't have to. There's so much more choice. The barriers to entry with technology have been significantly lowered. And so you're right. And it leads on to my next point, actually, around one of the biggest mistakes, which is around hiding behind technology or assuming your technology is the be all and end all. Because when we do that, we start to take away our character, our customer service, our interaction, our humanity with people. Because at the end of the day, we're all here to either serve others with a product, a service, or some sort of benefit to help them through a problem or a challenge. And what I've seen a lot of startups actually, when they get all consumed by the new technology, the new ERP system, new sales systems, new inventory sales tracking system, whatever it is, they get so consumed by that, they then forget about how do we serve our customers well, be it through just dealing with customer service complaints, or just interacting with our investors, or just sales and marketing. So it's really to be careful not to be all consumed by that technology.
Well, great point as well. One of the things that when I talk to everything from students to my startups to people I work with, I used a concept, and I talked about it in the book, is this dichotomy between innovation of things and innovation of ways. And for a small organization, be it a technology company or not, I always encourage deeply thoughtful exploration of the things of innovation, which are the technologies of our day. It could be manufacturing technology, it could be hard technology, it could be soft, i.e. software, but then innovation of ways. And the same breakthrough thinking can happen on both sides. And it's an and, it's not an or. We need to think of both of those, but we do get excited about innovation of things, right? That's the way our brains are wired, and that's what everyone's telling us. But innovation of ways, the way in which we engage as human beings, is magical, and it's exponential as well. You can create the same impact on your customers with things and ways, and so that's a framework that I use to help people, get out of one or the other, because both, you can't have one without the other, and you have to think about them both. So anyways, that's just a pithy kind of way to describe the challenge that you raise: innovation of things, innovation of ways.
Yeah, I love it. In terms, so as we're thinking about, when you say ways, just to explore that a bit more, you're thinking about processes, how we do things, and how we interact with each other.
And use your language of just human connectivity, right? Is that ways are often process, and process is often human. And sure, there can be automated process. I get that, but ways of our customer is increasingly becoming more demanding and sophisticated, and so the ways in which we deal with them are often what distinguish the difference. And so ways are very much the human processes that we're trying to break down or change.
And just I wanted to move to the final point, which is related to that, actually, around as we innovate ways. Some of the audience might be saying, well, how do I do that? I'm so busy in the day-to-day and operations and tied into fixing, putting out fires and growing my business and all the other demands. So the message I have related to, again, people think technology is an answer, and it helps for sure. But they often think, as startup owners and leaders, that it's up to them to fix. And what I wanted to reiterate is it's actually a quote by Dan Sullivan, a Canadian entrepreneur, who said it's all about who, not how. So don't feel that you as a leader have to always come up with a how yourself. Think about who you can talk to, who you can interact with. And to your point around innovating the ways, be it mixing with your teams, your own team, mixing with fellow startup entrepreneurs, joining groups through SAIT, through Bow Valley College, through the platform Calgary, and some of the forums I run in wedeliveryourvision.com. So yeah, Jim, I just wanted to get your thoughts on that collaboration with other groups and that power of the WHO going forward.
Yeah, that's and there's an expression called that's a slow hanging fastball for me in the baseball terms. I mean, you're talking to a guy who looked at the world around him and in partnership with some amazing, incredible people at the A100 and Brad Zumwalt. We started the Rainforest Movement, right? Which was all about the WHO, that says, as we think about innovation and the technical ecosystem and just ecosystems generally, it's all about community. It's all about the sum of the value of a network is not the number of individuals. It's the sum of the connections between those individuals. And that's the value of a network. And so we looked at that very closely and deeply dove into the ideas of how you build community, how you work. So I find it very, very interesting for any of your folks who are on the leading edge of technology. We're really looking into the thinking and ideas around Web3. And Web3 is a sum of technologies, but at the core, what it talks about is community. It says that what this new web is going to power is the ability for community participants to engage, not just on a social basis, not even on, hey, I know you, John, you know me, Jim, but actually on a way of commerce, on a way of ownership, a way of value. And so community is evolving into, this loose group of people who have a shared purpose, with the ability to earn and own and be a part of a commercial relationship that is trusting, it's identifiable. So community, pay attention to this space. Web3 is not about technology. If you look at it carefully, Web3, what's coming is about community. And I'm really, really intrigued on that. So anyways, that's for another day. So
yeah. But yeah, absolutely. And we can deep dive on that at another time. But just as we start to wrap up there, if you were to leave our audience of the entrepreneur startup and leaders with thoughts around Web3 or any other, as you look back on your startups, and if you think, oh, I wish I'd known that then, what advice would you give for the listeners?
It's a good question, and I don't want to be that guy that says, well, this is how it works. I don't know necessarily, but the number one thing for me, and this is a bit of my history, is surround find those partners, find partners, find co-conspirators, I call them. Find those who have the shared vision and mission at a deep level. The idea of the solo entrepreneur kind of climbing the hill is just it just doesn't work. The world's moving too fast, and when we talk about team building, those core founding teams need to share a purpose, but they need to be complementary in terms of their skills and their personality types and what turns them on. You need somebody who can think and vision and so forth, but you need somebody who just loves executing and getting stuff done on a daily basis. You need somebody who's quite technical and can understand the bits and bytes. And then you need somebody who can go, that's all good. Let me talk about the problem with my customer. And so I can't emphasize enough the idea of be a good partner. And what that means is not only find good partners, but be a good partner. Be somebody who is open and listens and aggressively listens and pays attention to what's going on. That's been my success in my career is doing that. So I encourage that strongly.
Yes, and it's almost a shame. A lot of our education systems, mine from the UK, and I'm sure Canadian is similar, is we're taught to go away, find the answer, and come back as on our own. There are case studies for sure and group exercises, but a lot of it is you're individually tested based on your abilities. And in this day and age, as you point out, and that's why I love the who, not how. Is who can I talk to? Understand what you're good at, but then don't feel you have to fill all the shoes. There's so many easy ways to focus on what you're good at. So if you're a visionary and you like leading and having that future thinking, focus on that. There is importance around the operational work, and that's where through my services, I'm project management, I'm operational. So I love partnering with visionary because I'm less of a visionary myself. My wife's a visionary, so we often have those interactive conversations where she's thinking ahead and I'm thinking practicalities as well. So to your point, it's finding that partnership.
And it's hard because it's humbling. It requires you to be self-reflective. It requires you to understand who and what you are all about. And that idea of the lone entrepreneur, fighting the battles it doesn't have to be. And we live in a world that is literally globally connected with the tools of the gods, right? Yeah. We literally have the ability to talk to anyone, anywhere, anyhow. And if we don't take advantage of that at our peril, would be my advice. It's just, people are out there. So.
Yes, and even in this virtual world, it's so easy to surround yourself with those thought leaders, even if it's just YouTube videos and books and podcasts. It's just that inspiration driving you forward. Yeah. So that was awesome. Really enjoyed that chat there, Jim, and so much to unpack. And I'll create some show notes to help our audience as well. And in the meantime, we'll do another related podcast in the future. But just wanted to thank you for your time, and hope you have a great rest of the day.
I will, and don't hesitate, have your listeners put my contact information. We are a community, so don't hesitate to do that as well. So,
yes, I was going to say. So if our audience wanted to reach out to you, Jim, what's the best way to contact you?
So generally just reach out to me on LinkedIn, and then we'll connect from there. That's usually the best way. I'm very active on social media and Twitter, but find me on LinkedIn and we'll connect from there.
Awesome. Great stuff. Well, thanks for your time, Jim, and have a great rest of the day.
All right. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Let's Talk About It podcast, brought to you by WeDeliverYourVision.com. the go-to place for delivering your vision and getting traction fast. Until the next episode, let's get it done.